Hermeto Pascoal has been one of the leading lights of Brazilian jazz for more than 50 years, and after spending much of the 1960s in combo configurations, he released his first album proper as a bandleader in 1970, simply titled Hermeto, and from that album, the track Coalhada. Already we've got that real 60s brassy sound. We heard some runs of Hermeto himself right at the beginning, but he's letting a few other people shine. Notice how that saxophone just took over the melody that we had heard at the beginning from Hermeto. It got transposed to another instrument. Or maybe tuba. There's some tuba on this album, and it just occurred to me how few albums I've actually listened to with tuba on them. In fact, I need to take inventory of that because the tuba was largely phased out in the 1930s. Now this is what I was waiting for. Some early use of Fender for the Brazilian scene. What a time to be doing Hermeto Pascoal, since right now him and I are twins. I love the master of ceremonies quality of the brass. It's got kind of this grand entrance flair to it. Now it's just getting all like completely abstract, like all like Jackson Pollock. Well, the sonic equivalent anyway. It's just everything is just colliding. I often think of these kind of passages as like splatter painting. That was quick. Let's hear another track from the album, Alicate. And this one is going to... This one has a certain someone on vocals. A softer track here. Let's catch up on some of the players that we've heard. A lot of credits. The album is conducted by Art Koenig. A bunch of string players, like, well, at least looks like about a dozen of them. Uh, no names I recognize offhand. Trombone, played by Garnet Brown, Jack Jeffers, Richard Hickson, Wayne Andre. Trumpet, Ernie Royal, Gene Young, Joe Newman, Melvin Davis, Thad Jones, someone I recognize. Tuba, Don Butterfield. Woodwind, Arthur Clark, Harold Jones, Hubert Laws, yep. Jerome Richardson, Jerry Dodgian, Joe Farrell, good. Leon Cohen, Marie Smith. Googie Coppola has vocals on one track. Neither of these two that we're hearing, though. And Erto Moreira, drums on a couple of tracks. Neither of the ones that we're playing, though. And our guy Hermeto on keyboards and flute on the album. And Ron Carter on bass. And a vocalist who I will wait till we actually hear her. Now we're Hermeto and I are even more twins, although I could have pulled it off even more like a year ago when I still had long hair. Now this has like a real misty kind of romantic vibe of the era. I can't wait to hear the vocals when they arrive. Now that is a strange instrument, whatever it is. It sounds like something's being kind of muffled. This sounds like music kind of like in low flight over the Caribbean. This is like landing over Rio de Janeiro kind of music. Perfect music for the airplane. Listen to those chords. We're getting some melody in here now. Na 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 na. I'm hearing some major sevenths in here. That really soft, dark brass that's kind of playing melodies over the chords. It's almost like two different tracks are being played in a way. It's just kind of doing its own thing, not necessarily along to the chords. And now we are colliding into chaos here. It's like we've entered a hall of mirrors. So that's the vocals we get. There's some anguished kind of vocals trying to be heard from out of the void. And you would never guess who those vocals are by, well, unless you were to take an educated guess and think, oh, what were some of the vocalists who were quite close to Hermeto Pascoal during the era? Well, that was the track Alicate from the album Hermeto, the 1970 release by Brazilian keyboardist Hermeto Pascoal. And yes, vocals on that track, what little existed of them, were done by none other than Flora Purim, who sings on 3 tracks in somewhat restrained capacity, I guess. And Gugi Coppola does vocals on 1 track, and 1 track that we didn't hear. But I mean, Gugi Coppola was actually around back then. I know that the following year she did the album Air with her brother. I think produced by Hubert Laws, or no, Herbie Mann, I think, produced it, and. She was pretty young at the. I just didn't think she had quite made it out of the American scene. I didn't think she would have these international contacts yet this early. But anyway, yeah, Hermeto Pascoal. But then again, I don't know where this album was released in 1970 on Cobblestone. There are a few Americans, actually quite a lot of Americans. So I guess it's more like Hermeto already had his hands in the American jazz scene. Anyway, we have also heard some early uses of the Fender. On the first track we heard of the Fender Rhodes by a Brazilian musician, well, by a non-American musician. And so the electrification of jazz was happening worldwide as early as 1970. And yeah, there would be even better albums to come from Hermeto Pascoal, who was constantly exploring and roping in all kinds of musicians throughout the 70s, recording somewhat sporadically, but has always been like a consistent, has always had a high level of quality to his releases. Heck, in 1987, as late as that year, he put out a tour de force that ended up making making some quite prestigious year-end lists out of a hefty pool of competition, and he was past the age of 50 by that point. For more Rubies and Sapphires by Hermeto Pascoal, see the directory of albums by Brazilian artists linked in the description below. And like and subscribe, and follow me on social media to know when the next video is coming out. And on that Brazilian list, you can, in addition to the Hermeto Pascoal catalog, you can also find the catalogs of Flora Purdom, Edo Moriere, and am I murdering his name? And some other musicians probably heard on this release, and many others by this great artist. And leave a comment below if there are any observations you made, if there are any mistakes I made in my identification of certain tones, instruments, or... yeah, comment on that. And until next time, this is Zaragon, the world's most ear travel trem maximalist, signing off.